At the end of the Middle Ages, a mighty nation arose on the borderlands between Europe and Asia, a land called Russia. A dynasty of Viking princes would lift Russia to greatness. The greatest of their line, Tsar Ivan the Terrible, would cast Russia into chaos. Out of the ashes would rise a giant, a new Russian empire, and the man who created it, sailor, soldier, carpenter, Tsar, Peter the Great. Russia. In the words of Winston Churchill, Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. Even today, years after the fall of communism, Russia retains a sense of mystery, and Russia's history remains a riddle.
There's no question in my mind that there is not one Russia, but that there are many Russias. And there's also very little question in my mind that there are many different Russian histories.
Is there a Russian nation? Yes, there is a Russian nation. What is it? 1,000 different things, depending on what you want it to be.
What makes Russia particularly different is firstly its sheer size. It is, after all, the biggest country on earth. And secondly, I suppose, the fact that it is Europe, but then again it isn't quite Europe.
The enigma that is Russia begins long ago, before Stalin, before Lenin, before the Reds took power. Russia was ruled by the Romanov dynasty for 300 years. Yet even the Romanovs are relative newcomers. The birth of the Russian Empire reaches back over 1,000 years to an age when history tangled with myth and a nation found its identity in a mystical faith. At its peak, the empire of the Tsars would span 1/6 of the globe, from the glories of St. Petersburg and Moscow, across the endless forests of Siberia, to the shores of the Pacific and beyond.
The land which is currently Russia is, of course, enormous.
The distance between one end of the Russian Empire and the other end of the Russian Empire is the same as the distance from Moscow to Chicago.
And part of the story of the history of Russia is the filling up of that space.
The land that would be Russia was never a single country. The Russian people, never a single race. Turks and Slavs, Mongols and Finns, Russia is a nation of many nations, a land not of one people, but of many different peoples.
All those groups have different patterns of settlement, obviously speak different languages, and have no sense of being part of a coherent land at all.
Before Russia became a nation, what connected the people of the Eurasian frontier were rivers, endless, awesome rivers.
Rivers were the highways, rivers were the roads, the rivers were the connections between the widely scattered populations. The rivers provided the force lines drawing people together.
The rivers are absolutely essential to the expansion of the Russians in every direction and to the creation of this kind of enormous state. Without the rivers, they could never have held it together.
In the 9th century, Viking warriors sailed down the rivers at the edge of Europe, the Dnieper, the Don, the Volga. The Vikings pioneered new trade routes, a shortcut to the riches of the Orient, Arabia, and Constantinople. Natives along the rivers called the Vikings the Rus, and as the Vikings battled and bartered their way to power, the frontier between Europe and Asia became known as the land of the Rus, Russia.
One of the stories of Russian history is how gradually links are forged in a very small way. Strands emerge, beginnings of connections happen and begin to intertwine. Then one turns around and, good heavens, we have a place called Russia.
By the late 10th century, the land that would be Russia was a patchwork of warring city-states. Rival Viking princes battled for supremacy. The greatest of these ancient cities was Kiev, and Vladimir, Grand Prince of Kiev, was the most powerful man of the land of the Rus. But Vladimir wasn't content to be first among equals. The Grand Prince sought greater power, to reign over the Rus as a God-given ruler.
One of the things which a would-be ruler of that large and diverse land needed was some central focus of authority, some sort of central cult which would give him a legitimacy and authority beyond simply the use of military force.
In the legends of Russia's birth, Prince Vladimir searched for a single religion to bind together the many pagan peoples of the Rus. According to ancient texts, Vladimir sent out emissaries and met with the Jews, the Muslims, and the Catholics in a quest to find the one true faith. Then his men came to Constantinople. Here, in the heart of the Christian Orthodox world, Vladimir's envoys at last found the power and glory their Grand Prince craved.
The envoys went to Constantinople and were so impressed by the sheer aesthetic beauty of it. We saw such beauty there, we did not know whether we were in heaven or on earth. We only know that God must live in that place.
Constantinople's might and splendor helped convince Vladimir to convert to the Orthodox faith. Then, as God's agent on earth, he commanded his subjects be baptized as Christians, or face his wrath. Prince Vladimir had united the land of the Rus with religion, but at his death, he left his kingdom divided among his sons. Civil war between rival brothers threatened to tear the kingdom apart. One of Vladimir's heirs, Sviatopolk, was determined to rule all by himself. But he feared that his brothers Boris and Gleb would stand in his way.
Boris and Gleb were not interested in seizing power, but Sviatopolk doesn't trust them. He's described in the text as lawless, as though he were outside Christian morality. And he decides to kill them.
Boris was alone at prayers when his brother's henchmen found him. He knew a fight for the throne would tear his beloved land apart. He chose instead to die without resisting. To die to save the soul of Russia. The murderous drama was repeated as the killers slaughtered the tyrant's other brother, Gleb.
They fell upon him like wild beasts and overcame him by piercing him with sharp blades.
Sviatopolk's treachery ignited open war. The Rus arose to avenge the blood of the martyrs. Ironically, the tyrant was driven into exile, while Boris and Gleb were invested with divine power, canonized as the first saints of the Russian Orthodox Church. Their sacrifice consecrated the new faith of the Rus with holy Russian blood.
That's the significance of Boris and Gleb. They're innocent sufferers. They accept the blows of the lawless Sviatopolk, and in accepting those blows, they act out the passion of Jesus.
In the bloody slaughter of Boris and Gleb, Russia's church and Viking rulers had achieved a holy glory and divine authority. For Russia, the blood had just begun to flow. In time to come, invaders from the east would turn the land of the Rus into their stomping grounds, the Mongol Khans of the Golden Horde.